larger crowd than I expected. So thank you guys for coming out. Thank you to Babino, Saul, and Leanna for reading. And thank you to Malvern. I know we had a bit of a problem last week, but I'm glad you guys came out. Although somebody said that we should have done it last week with all the paint fumes, because you guys would have had a great experience. So I hope you guys have a great experience now. This first poem is titled Lucha Libre, and it's Spanish for sort of like Mexican wrestling. I thought for a split second that I wanted to become a Mexican wrestler, but I realized I don't look really good in spandex, so I wrote this poem instead. It was the mask I wanted more than fame. The tight turquoise leather tied with red shoestring around my nape. The thought of being someone else without being anchored to a face. So as not to face the features in the face that were slowly changing, growing stranger by the year. And there was a white complexion so different from the darker shades of skin around me. And the pimples unwilling to renounce their loyalty, leaving me to reinvent the candy red bumps as chicken pox instead. Even if I didn't know the one-hit wonder of this disease, once I saw those Mexican men fighting on TV, I couldn't care less if anyone else believed it. If I, like them, was putting up a front because a front was the surest thing to guise myself in. To carry my confidence further than their choreographed jumps, than their lunges, plunges, angelic dives, than the tiptoe rope walking as they backflipped farther into the ring. Or as their sweaty bodies begin to sink with the crowd's shock and awe, feed off their praise and screams. And there I was, bouncing off my bed, mumbling Spanish I could barely speak, and hardly able to drop kick, eye poke, cross chop, pile drive, headbutt, body slam, brain burst, somersault, shoulder claw, slingshot or sleeper hole into my role as a rudo. The dirty plain villain, desperate to pin the appearance I no longer wanted. To wait for the count and finish off with a headlock so I wouldn't have to take off my mask. Reveal to myself who I knew I really was. You guys can definitely do the snaps. It's not really common, but I enjoy it immensely. Lifts up my ego a little bit. This one is titled Telenovela, and this is for all the Mexican moms who are obviously obsessed with this. I was born to a line of housewives obsessed with living more dramatically. Devoted mothers immersed in Mexican telenovelas. Those afternoon marathons built on the same basic plot. Handsome Latin boy falls for gorgeous Latin girl. Jealous ex-lovers scheme to break them apart. Their struggle aggravated by conniving aunts and uncles, pregnant maids and mistresses, rich and misleading stepfathers usurping everyone's camera time. Eager to push their way into frame when the scene shifts to a shirtless farmhand, slowly pans across his young and hairless chest, those polished blots of sweat dilating my mother's eyes with subplots of haystack sex. To sit and watch another episode was an episode in and of itself. The rising action of her middle-aged and plus-sized body rising to adjust the foil-wrapped lantana. To smack the hiccup static from the box, catch the out-of-wedlock drama, its sharp and sudden orchestra coupled with another Julio, tu eres el papá. Because every twist fed her confidence. She'd nudge me to lift my shoes off the couch, mimicking every multitasking mother who controlled the show, women she imagined herself to be, as I imagined her inner monologue saying she wanted out. The courage to break the spell of having a household to clean, of cooking for a husband whose sun-branded skin secreted wet cement, filled the kitchen with a scent she tried to kill with pine salt and potpourri. I could see her taking mental notes on how to fake a death, on the latest ways to use mascara, comb her knotted hair, hold back the waterworks when boy was losing girl, or when again a novella was about to end. And she turned to me as if I were the boy cast solely for his smile, to provide some sort of cute and comic relief, or comments so innocently profound they'd linger beyond the screen, beyond the shadows of the kitchen table where she helped me master English with her broken English, reading story after story like lines off a script, and rehearsing every scene where the mother sighs, hugs her son, accepts the role she knows she has to play. Oh, we gotta clap there. Okay. This next one is titled La Pulga, which is Spanish for flea market. And growing up in the Rio Grande Valley, we would go to these constantly. And I'd always go with my grandma, and my grandmother had darker skin than I did. So it was always a little bit strange when we'd walk through and it was just her and I. You see why specifically. Here we go. Sunday morning strolls along the frontage road like a censer swinging priest, scrapes its sunlight against the corroded chain link fence. Between the lines of traffic overflowing from the entrance, where I already taste the scent of wet cilantro, grilled onions, mixed meat and eggs sizzled in a haze of dust shovel heat. In a blanket of black exhaust crawling across the pothole-riddled parking lot, and through the rows of sunburned cars nudging each other like buzzards on a corpse they've yet to eat. I endure my grandfather's crooked parking, the constant honking, the backseat acoustics of thin music sprinkled in the air, those far-off plastic speakers blaring songs with unpredictable trumpets, and Spanish gritos slapped against my English Oni ears. Even if that language isn't mine, I attempt to translate how I'm witnessed through every detail in this scene. The light-skinned boy walking hand in hand with his mud-brown grandparents, weaving through labyrinths of $2 soft bundles, cases of tomato, strawberries, knockoff DVDs, and mountains of used car parts ripe with rust and unreliability. Where my grandfather stops, scans the price tags for discounts, then moves us along before the vendors stare long enough to make me believe I'm the one I've been kidnapped from the suburbs. That my grandparents are here to parade their new prize around. And yet, as we carve our presence farther in, as I imagine my grandparents on the other end, watching as I leave, I begin to feel I'm the one who's kidnapped them, softly tugging their clay bodies through a market they'll never see again. A week in life remembered only by the netted sacks of garlic bought, piled like wreaths across the back seats where I lay my head to rest, tired, thirsty, and ready to lead these strangers to a better home. There's two more. This next one is titled Goats. I have a really big fascination with goats for some reason. I try to use them as much in my poetry. A few years back, Melissa's here, they kind of asked me if I could write a poem for their wedding, and I started to write, but unfortunately I ended up writing about goats. I couldn't escape it. This isn't that poem, but the essence of that goat fascination is still there. So. It's not a weird fascination, just literary fascination.
Thank you for clarifying.
Of course. You never know nowadays. Of course, I had to believe there was purpose to everything. The 5 a.m. chicken feed routine, the cleaning of the shit-caked cages, the careful cow milking, and the carrying of runt pigs thirsty for their mother's teats. And there were the goats I thought of more as ponies when I released them to the hills, my favorite scene for the least favorite part of my day. Imagine a childhood of goats, each one vocal in their own goatish way. And imagine learning the word castration, how sharp it sounded, how my father taught me how to hoist them by their legs, wide and firm, but calm enough not to resemble violence. We were cutting off their jewels after all. Our hands needed to be silent. The first few times, I expected a joke, something about how bad it must feel. And when I tried to crack one of my own, he shook his head, said he was glad they were still too young to feel, that they wouldn't remember a thing. But I remember how he clamped the tissue with the illustrator, adjusted the rubber band while the buckling cried the way bucklings cried when they were out in the pasture, bending their soft backs beneath the barbed wire fence, aware of what was coming when I caught up to them, grazed my fingers through their ears and nape, then carried their soft bodies back to the wooden table, where I gripped their hooves, flipped them upside down, and from where I watched throughout the struggle, the moon on the drought-riddled plains, swollen, throbbing, and ready to fall. And this last one is titled Fence. If there's any poem in this particular collection that sort of embodies my living in the valley, it is definitely this particular poem. We would always, my mother and I would always go to Mexico just because dental work was a lot cheaper there. And so this poem just brings back a lot of memories. So it's titled Fence. And thank you guys for coming so much. Really appreciate each and every single one of you guys. We'll probably get together and do something right now shortly after, but I want to thank everybody again. Thank you, Malvern. We weren't exactly tourists anymore. Amateurs at crossing over, tossing change and lint inside their half-cut, empty jugs of milk, nodding as they blessed us from behind the fence, their scabbard fingers anchored to the plastic's jagged edge, heavy with the weight of pity, stares. We weren't exactly shocked by all the begging at the border, the women sprawled outside the bridge, sleeping children cradled in serapes, strapped like hammocks below their mother's breast, as hordes of flies dove at their eyelids and crawled across their swollen cheeks. As sad as the scene was supposed to be, I still had fun feeding quarters down the slot, swinging past the metal arms, the rattle from the turnstile louder than pennies dancing inside a can. We'd matured from trivialities, group photos at the flagpole, at the emblem of an eagle with a snake perched above a cactus, copper cruelly chipping off, a metaphor for the landscape of this country. At 10, I had no metaphors for barefooted boys selling cheeklets like insurance, running after every passerby, tugging their sleeves, nagging how their gum was cheaper than the other guys. But 10 centavos was too desperate to translate to my mother's ears. And even though she spoke their language, she used her English silence to mute their pleas. Those shouts for discount pharmaceuticals, healing herbs and Freon, strings of garlic and street-side taco stands drenched in spices I had never smelled. We were them without the burden of being them. Shared last names with them, an economic convenience, living so close to them. But when my mother gripped me closer to her waist, clenched the collar of my white and sweaty shirt, I heard the tension in her grip saying I was not, would never be one of them. Would play the role of in-between instead. The relative from El Otro Lado, the boy straddled in the valley of two geographies, walking over with his stoic, middle-aged mother, unaware that her stay-at-home salary didn't come with dental, that her enamel was dissolving, riddled with cavities across her molars, where she thrust and dig with toothpicks, nails, scoop out the half-chewed gunk of food, repeat the rhythm after every meal. And there came a point when all she scraped was nerve and gum, when her habit spread into years of sleeplessness, aggravated by a dentist speaking Spanish, too clinical to understand. Drilling, talking, drilling, pausing, yanking out the reasons why we made our trips. Those weekend afternoons crossing back high on anesthesia and lobby candy. Staggering past the line of women, still staring through the heavy mesh. And still melting along the shadeless pavement. Wondering, I imagine, how our sloppy smiles tasted. Thank you guys so much.